There are two kinds of silence in this world. One is the silence of someone who has nothing to say. The other is the silence of someone who has decided you are no longer worth speaking to. You have felt the difference. You have stood on the receiving end of both. And you already know which one haunts you more. The first silence is empty. The second silence is a weapon. One leaves you bored. The other keeps you awake at 3 a.m, scrolling back through old messages, searching for the moment everything changed. Today, we are going to dismantle what silence actually does to the human mind. Not the polite kind, not the awkward kind, the deliberate, strategic, devastating kind, the kind Machiavelli studied in the courts of Renaissance Italy and turned into an instrument of absolute control. Because when someone goes silent on you, truly silent, what happens next inside your mind is not accidental. It is one of the oldest psychological operations in human history. And once you understand it, no one will ever be able to use it against you again. Here is what most people believe about silence. They believe it means the other person is busy, or hurt, or confused, or maybe just lost interest. They tell themselves a story that makes the silence bearable, some explanation that lets them sleep at night. But deliberate silence is none of those things. Deliberate silence is a calculated removal of information from someone who desperately needs it. And that distinction changes everything. Psychologists call this phenomenon ambiguous loss. It was first studied in the context of people who vanish without explanation, prisoners of war, missing persons, loved ones who simply walk away and never say why. The research found something remarkable. Ambiguous loss is harder to process than confirmed death. The brain can grieve a loss it understands. It cannot grieve a loss it cannot explain. When someone dies, the pain is enormous, but it has a shape. There is a funeral, a memory, a moment you can point to and say, that is when it ended. When someone goes silent, there is no shape. There is no ending. There is only the open wound of not knowing. And Machiavelli, 5 centuries before modern psychology confirmed any of this, understood it intuitively. He watched the courts of Florence and Rome. He saw how the most dangerous players never announced their displeasure. They never confronted. They never explained. They simply withdrew their presence and let the silence do the work. In The Prince, Machiavelli writes that a leader must know when to act and when to withhold action, and that withholding is often the more powerful choice. He was not talking about laziness or passivity. He was describing a precise form of control. The control that comes from denying someone the one thing their mind cannot survive without: an answer. The reason silence devastates us has nothing to do with weakness. It has to do with how the human brain is wired at its most fundamental level. Your brain is a pattern completion machine. Every waking moment, it takes incomplete information and fills in the gaps. You see half a face in a shadow, and your brain constructs the whole person. You hear the first 3 notes of a song, and your brain finishes the melody. This process is automatic, involuntary, and relentless. Now apply that to silence. When someone stops communicating with you, no explanation, no warning, no fight that would at least give you a reason, your brain encounters an incomplete pattern. And it cannot leave it incomplete. It is biologically incapable of letting it go. So it starts generating explanations. Was it something I said? Was it that message from Tuesday? Did they find someone better? Are they punishing me? Did I misread everything from the beginning? Each explanation your brain generates feels plausible for about 15 minutes. Then it collapses, and a new one takes its place. This cycle can repeat for days, weeks, sometimes months. Neuroscientists have documented this. The dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, the same region that processes physical pain, activates during social exclusion. Being ignored literally hurts the same way a wound hurts. Machiavelli did not have brain scanners, but he had something equally powerful: observation. He watched what silence did to ambitious men in the courts of Italy. He saw how a single week of unanswered letters could reduce a confident diplomat to a stammering wreck. He documented how rulers who withdrew their attention could control entire alliances without issuing a single command. The mechanism is ancient. The pain it causes is real. And the people who wield it, consciously or unconsciously, are exploiting the deepest vulnerability your brain possesses. The vulnerability of needing to know why. Think about that for a moment. Your brain is running a program right now that it cannot shut off. The desperate search for closure in situations where none was ever offered. So tell me in the comments, when was the last time someone's silence kept you awake? When was the last time you replayed a conversation 100 times, trying to find the fracture point, the exact moment the silence began? Write it below. You do not need to have the answer figured out. The act of naming it is already the first step toward disarming it. Because silence only holds power over a mind that does not understand what is happening to it. And you are beginning to understand. If this is the kind of awareness you want to keep building, subscribe. What comes next goes deeper into the machinery of how this works. And more importantly, how to make yourself immune to it. Now that you understand the mechanism, let us look at how it shows up in your actual life. Because silence does not wear just one mask. It wears several. And each one targets a different part of you. The first face of deliberate silence is punishment without evidence. You know this one. You have lived inside it. Something shifts between you and another person. The warmth disappears. The messages stop. The invitations dry up. And the worst part, you have no idea what you did. You search your memory obsessively. You replay every interaction. You analyze every text you sent. And you find nothing. No fight, no insult, no clear moment of rupture. Just a door that closed without a sound. This is punishment without a verdict. A prison sentence without a trial. And what it does to you psychologically is devastating. Because you cannot defend yourself against an accusation that was never spoken. You begin to invent your own crimes. You start believing you must have done something terrible, even though no evidence exists. The silence becomes a mirror that reflects every insecurity you have ever carried. The second phase is the control test. This is when someone goes silent, not because they are hurt, but because they want to measure how much power they hold over you. They withdraw and then they watch. Will you chase? Will you send the double text? Will you show up uninvited? Will you ask mutual friends what happened? Every action you take in response to their silence is data. It tells them exactly how dependent you are, exactly how far they can push, exactly how much control they hold. Machiavelli described this dynamic precisely in his analysis of political alliances. A prince who wished to test the loyalty of a subject would not ask directly. He would create a vacuum, pull back favor, withdraw attention, reduce contact. and then observe who came running. The ones who panicked revealed their dependency. The ones who remained steady revealed their strength. You have been this test subject more than once. And every time you chased, you confirmed the silent person's power. The third face is the most dangerous. It is strategic erasure. This is when someone removes you from their life, not in anger, not in pain, but as a calculated decision that you are no longer useful. There is no emotion behind it. There is no grudge. You simply no longer serve their interests. So they redirect their attention elsewhere. You feel the absence like a death, but for them, it was a budget reallocation. Nothing personal, just strategy. This is the face of silence that destroys self-worth. Because at least punishment implies you mattered enough to anger. At least a control test implies you mattered enough to manipulate. But strategic erasure implies something far worse. That you never mattered at all. There is a fourth face, and it is the one most people overlook. The wounded retreat. Not every silence is an attack. Sometimes the person who went silent is drowning. They pulled away not to punish you, not to test you, but because they no longer had the capacity to stay. Depression does this. Grief does this. Shame does this. The person vanishes not from strength, but from collapse. And the cruelty is that it feels identical from the outside. You cannot tell the difference between someone who is punishing you and someone who is barely surviving, because both produce the same result: silence. This is the face that demands the most discernment, and it is the face most people misread entirely. Now you have seen the four faces: punishment, control, erasure, and collapse. But beneath all four lies a single engine that powers every form of deliberate silence. And understanding this engine is what separates the person who gets destroyed by silence from the person who becomes immune to it. The engine is this: silence works because it hijacks your need for narrative. Human beings do not experience life as a series of random events. We experience life as a story. Every relationship has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Every conflict has a cause, a confrontation, and a resolution. Your brain demands this structure. It cannot function without it. When someone goes silent, they remove the ending from your story. They take away the final chapter. And your brain, that relentless pattern completion machine, will spend months, sometimes years, trying to write one. This is why you cannot stop thinking about the person who ghosted you. This is why you check their social media at 2 a.m. This is why a relationship that ended with a conversation hurts less than one that ended with nothing. The conversation gave you a final chapter. The silence left the book open forever. Machiavelli saw something in the courts of Italy that modern psychologists are only now confirming. He saw that information is the true currency of power, and that withholding it is more devastating than deploying it. In The Prince, he describes how Cesare Borgia maintained control not through constant communication, but through strategic opacity. Borgia's allies never knew exactly where they stood. His enemies never knew his next move. He created an information vacuum around himself, and everyone else scrambled to fill it with their own fears, hopes, and projections. This is exactly what happens when someone goes silent on you. They become opaque, and in the absence of real information, you project. You fill the void with your worst fears, your deepest insecurities, your most painful assumptions. The The silent person does not need to attack you. Your own mind does it for them. They simply remove the information, and your psychology handles the rest. This is what makes silence the most efficient weapon in human relationships. It requires no effort from the wielder and maximum suffering from the target. Machiavelli wrote that the first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the people around him. But there is a corollary he implied without stating directly. The first method for estimating someone's power over you is to measure how much their silence controls your behavior. If someone can go quiet, and you immediately reorganize your entire emotional life around figuring out why, they own you. Not because they are powerful, but because you have handed them the keys to your inner world without them even asking. The silence was never about you. It was never a commentary on your worth, your lovability, or your value as a human being. Silence is a strategy. Sometimes conscious, sometimes unconscious. But it is always, always about the person deploying it, not the person receiving it. The person who punishes you with silence is telling you they lack the capacity for honest confrontation. The person who tests you with silence is telling you they need control more than they need connection. The person who erases you with silence is telling you their world revolves around utility, not love. And the person who retreats into silence is telling you they are suffering, and their suffering has nothing to do with you. In every case, every single case, the silence is their story, not yours. The moment you truly internalize this, the weapon misfires. It hits nothing. Because the target, your need for their narrative, your dependency on their explanation, no longer exists. That is not coldness. That is not detachment. That is sovereignty. So what do you actually do with this understanding? How do you take the intellectual insight and turn it into something that changes how you feel at 3 a.m. when the silence is loudest? The first practice is narrative completion. Your brain cannot stop writing the story because it has no ending. So give it one, not the real one. You may never get the real one, but a functional one. Sit with a pen or an open document and write the final chapter yourself. Write what happened. Write what you think the silence means. Write the version that makes the most sense based on everything you know about that person. Then close the document. You are not seeking truth. You are giving your brain the structural closure it needs to stop looping. The story does not have to be accurate. It has to be complete. The second practice is the attention audit. Every day your mind drifts towards the silence. It replays, it wonders, it checks. This is not a character flaw. It is your brain running its pattern completion program on autopilot. The practice is to catch it in real time. When you notice your mind returning to the person who went silent, do not fight it. Do not shame yourself. Simply ask one question. Is this attention serving me right now? Not whether the thought is valid. Not whether you have a right to feel it. Just whether this specific moment of attention is making your life better or worse. If the answer is worse, redirect. Not with force. With the gentle precision of someone who understands what their brain is doing and chooses not to participate. Machiavelli wrote that the wise man does what he must, while the fool does what he can. Redirecting your attention from a void that will never answer you is not avoidance. It is wisdom. The third practice is the most difficult and the most liberating. It is the reversed lens. Every time you feel the pull of someone's silence, Every time you feel the desperate need to know why, reverse the question. Instead of asking, "Why did they go silent on me?" ask, "What does my reaction to their silence reveal about me?" This is not about blame. This is about discovery. If their silence sends you spiraling, that spiral is information. It tells you where your sense of worth is externally anchored. It shows you which parts of your identity depend on someone else's validation to hold together. It reveals the exact places where your self-concept is built on borrowed ground. This is uncomfortable work, but it is the only work that actually sets you free. Because once you see where the dependency lives, you can begin, slowly, honestly, to build something underneath yourself that does not collapse when another person walks away without explanation. That is not a project you finish in a week. It is the work of a lifetime. But every moment you choose to look inward instead of outward, every time you ask what the silence reveals about you instead of about them, you reclaim a piece of the power that the silence stole. Remember where we started? Two kinds of silence, one empty, one devastating. You have felt the devastating kind. You have lived inside it. You have lost sleep to it, lost confidence to it, lost pieces of yourself to it. But now you understand the machinery. You understand that your brain is running a program, pattern completion, and that silence exploits it with surgical precision. You understand the four faces it wears. You understand that the pain it causes is neurologically identical to physical injury. And you understand that the weapon only works on a mind that does not see it coming. You see it now. The silence that once controlled you was never a verdict on your worth. It was a void. And you were the one filling it with your own fears. The moment you stop filling it, the moment you write your own ending and audit your own attention and turn the lens back on yourself, the void loses its gravity. You do not need their words to be whole. You do not need their explanation to move forward. You do not need the final chapter they refuse to give you, because you are capable of writing it yourself. If you want to keep building this kind of awareness, subscribe. Every video on this channel goes this deep, and the next one continues exactly where this one ends. Not with another list of tactics, but with the next layer of understanding. The psychology beneath the strategy, the self-knowledge beneath the power. That is the work that actually changes how you move through the world. Not information alone, but the kind of insight that rewires how you see yourself and every person who has ever gone quiet on you. The silence was never your sentence. It was always their limitation. Thank you for being here. I will see you in the next one.